Hello, friends, and welcome to the Reclamation Podcast. I'm your host, Megan Colleen Johnson, and I'm here to guide us in raw conversations about thriving in life and work, so that together we can step into personal agency and stop letting life happen to us. We'll cover topics like health, boundaries, communication, finances, and worthiness. That badass business you've been dreaming of, it's not so far off. The desire to wake up feeling fully alive, it's right around the corner. All right, welcome to the podcast, everyone. I'm so excited for today's episode. I say that every time, but it's always such a good conversation, and today is especially exciting because I have my first life coach with me today, Madison Morrigan, and I'm so excited about it. So before I get ahead of myself, I am recording from my office today. I have some hot tea in front of me. I'm actually using a little sloth mug that just feels so comforting today. And then I've also got some water, and the sun is shining through the window. So it feels like a beautiful, cozy day today. So like I said, today I have Madison Morrigan with me, and Madison is a 4-time international award-winning life coach, a speaker and creator of Awaken Her Soul, a 14-week mentorship program designed to help women embody their worth, power, and fullness. Centered on self-responsibility and full expression, Madison coaches ambitious and creative women as she sheds layers of old programming, keeping them small and finally coming home to their true selves. Madison has her degree in interpersonal communication with an emphasis in psychology from Missouri State University. She's certified in conflict resolution and legal mediation and is proudly a certified BYCA coach. Wow, that is an incredible bio.
Thank you.
All kinds of juicy things in there. So, Madison, thank you for being here with me today.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I would love if you can kind of share a little bit of where you're recording from this morning, or I guess it's afternoon. My schedule feels all over the place right now. It feels like morning still.
We're on quarantine time. It's a little different.
Yes. So if you could just share like where you're recording from, kind of what's around you, any like smells or things like that, just kind of like a little sensory bit to kind of start our conversation.
I love that so much. And I love the opportunity to share. I'm in a brand new office. I just moved in with my girlfriend in the middle of the quarantine situation. So it has, it's not complete yet. I have my desk in here with a lamp and a candle, some crystals and incense. Actually, one of my new awards that BYCA sent me from winning the Awaken Her Soul award, I have that. And so the light's kind of shining through that. It's really beautiful. And funny enough, I have a twin mattress up here that is just sitting there, waiting to be redone. I've kind of got some new linen to put on it, and I'm hoping to make this space a really beautiful sanctuary. It is a beautiful sanctuary. It's just very incomplete right now. So in process is where I'm at. And I do have some incense going next to some little trinkets that really make me feel grounded. And then I'm looking at my laptop. That's what's right in front of me is my laptop.
Awesome. I love that. And I'm so excited for when you put your pieces together for your office, because I can only imagine how beautiful that's going to be. And I also love that you do have like a mattress just kind of up there. And love that you're going to have like a mattress in your office, like a bed in your office. I feel like that's just kind of fun. Sometimes it's nice to just work and like ground yourself in a comfy bed.
Yeah. I have my like treat for myself in 2019 was a biomat. And so I'm hoping to kind of have it be like a loungy, like writing space. So I've got a really beautiful, like some pillows and linens to make it like a day bed. But
I love that.
In process. It's not there yet.
So fun. A good project for quarantine though.
Yes, definitely.
Awesome. So yes, I'm so excited to have you. You were my first coach and really opened me up to this world of coaching. And I remember when I first got started reading through all of your blog posts to kind of catch tidbits of your story. And I'm excited to hear even more about that today. So I'd love if you could just kind of share a little bit of like, what is your reclamation story? I know there's probably a million facets to it, but yeah, how did you kind of start on your journey, and what did you really have to reclaim to step into the life and the work that you love?
Yeah, I love this. And I love that your work is so centered on reclamation, because that's truly been a big part of my journey. And, I'll do like a brief synopsis because people could obviously read more other places, but I always have had a really deep sense of self, but I grew up in a very abusive home environment. And whenever you experience a certain level of abuse, you learn to hide yourself and you learn to tuck pieces of yourself away. And by the time you reach, coming of age where you're living out in the world and living your truth, that can be quite dulled, diluted. And so by the time I was, a teenager and in my early 20s, I really sought out wholeness through extreme evangelical Christianity, which it felt like home to me because my home life had been so chaotic and so abusive that a space where God loved me and a space where the church would come around me and where I could express my joy, which was a deep part of who I am, fully in worship. All of that felt so good. But unfortunately, whenever we, grow up in abusive cultures or environments that make us cut off from ourselves, which although I grew up in an abusive home life, that's just a cultural mirror for what's happening, culturally with white supremacy and capitalism and patriarchy. Micro abuse is just a reflection of what's happening in the overculture. So, going into religion, I chose versions of religion in churches that mirrored my own abuse and brought a lot of my own confusion of who I was into those spaces. So after I graduated college, I really wanted to help other people getting those degrees and was really involved in women's ministries in my churches, leading and hosting circle. But what I was really missing was that I hadn't done any self-work. Like I thought I was whole in Jesus, so I didn't need to self-evaluate. And actually it was considered wrong to look at myself and to be whole in myself and to belong to myself, because literally that doctrine teaches that you do not belong to yourself and you're only whole in Christ. And so as I started to, a sibling of mine attempted a suicide, and it really stunned me into my own need for deeper work. And I started going to trauma therapy. And within 6 months of doing deep trauma work, I felt like nothing in my life made sense anymore. And it was almost like the veil had been taken off through starting to find my own wholeness, that programming of brokenness didn't work anymore. And so that, that meant that my religion stopped feeling the same. It meant that my marriage stopped feeling the same. It meant that most of my friendships stopped feeling the same. And that really sent me on an even longer journey of figuring out who I am without all of those identities. And so, that was years ago now. And so much has changed about my life. I've become a coach. I'm no longer identifying that kind of religion anymore. And my relationship with my family has completely shifted. And I would say like the things I have reclaimed have been the things that were always there, but I was taught to hide and to not identify with. And so it's been this peeling back of the way that my upbringing or culture or religion taught me that I was broken and wrong and that parts of me were bad or sinful. And understanding why we have shadows, understanding why we act in ways that you might call sin. And a lot of them are trauma related. And a lot of them are distorted human nature when we don't get our needs met. And so all of that to say, my reclamation story has brought me back to full acceptance of myself and is a continued journey. Like I'm just definitely still unfolding.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a beautiful, summary of a lot of things.
Yeah, of over a decade of stuff for sure.
Yeah, that's incredible. I love what you said towards the end there about how reclamation or your reclamation journey has been kind of peeling back those layers. And I think that I actually don't know that I've even said this on this podcast before, but the definition of reclamation is the process of claiming something back or of reasserting a right. And it's like peeling back those layers to claim back the pieces of ourselves that they're always there. They've always been there, but healing them and allowing them to shine fully. And yeah, thank you so much for just sharing all of that, because I feel like that in itself, I feel like I could listen back to that over and over and pull different pieces from it. I'm curious, could you share a little bit more about what reclaiming your spirituality look like, or reclaiming your faith? Because I know that that process is really in depth, and I've shared little tidbits within some conversations that I've had with people on this podcast, but I really respect your journey and how you kind of went about that. And I'd love if you could just dive into that a little more.
Yeah, yeah. So it's hard to reclaim something that you don't know is like missing, right? So like
Yeah.
it's like I didn't, whenever I was in evangelicalism in the way that I was, I could say, born again, whatever language, I was very much devotional. Like that, it was such a big like portion of my life. And it was very real for me. It wasn't something that I was necessarily born into and just raised and taught to believe because I should. It was something I chose, and something that was deeply important to me. And so when when doubt started coming up, and I would bring questions to my leadership and to my mentors, and my questions were shut down, and my intuition and things that just felt so off to me, that I couldn't understand Christ saying. I couldn't understand some of the manipulation I was seeing. An example would be a college ministry I was a part of. One of their tactics to get new people in was at the beginning of the college year to host this party that, everyone on leadership was assigned to be taking names and writing them down and contacting people and following up. And everyone was assigned 3 people. And, in this meeting, I would just raise my hand and be like, this doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel authentic. It doesn't feel like relationship. Why does it have to be like this? And so it was starting with this, like, why does this feel bad to me? Why do I have to exile people from my life who are gay? Why do I have to have my friends who are having sex with their boyfriend? Like, why is that not okay? And really what I started to see was that people who had different opinions and people who had who expressed themselves in ways that were not right according to certain structures and cultures were told they really couldn't be there or shamed until they left. And I was like, that feels so bad that, for me, I thought it was just my church at the time. I was like, maybe I'm just in a really bad church, like I still love God, but goodness. And so I spent about 2 years, I left that church I had been in for a really long time. And a lot of people from that church actually stopped speaking to me because I, turned my back on what they considered to be the right way to do Christianity and went to a different church. And I just started seeing this divisiveness. And then my mentors told me not to go to therapy and that, God would heal me, and just all of this dissonance around what a woman should be, what healing should look like, who's welcome, who can be accepted. It started feeling, the only thing I can actually say about how it felt was that I felt like I was lying by existing in these spaces and not speaking up. But when I spoke up, I was a problem. And it came down to every time I would go to church, no matter what church I was going to or trying to be a part of, I had severe anxiety before church. And at this point, I was still reading my Bible every day, praying that God would change my heart, confessing my doubts to mentors. But at the same time, I was a waitress at the time, and I was waiting tables to people who were very different than me. Like, my church was very much against transgender rights to for people to go in the bathrooms they felt comfortable with. And that law made sense that people should use the restroom that they felt was safest to them. And I saw my church kind of using this campaign, a political campaign from the pulpit, saying that these people were child molesters and these people were evil and they were brainwashed. And I knew those people because I had built relationships with them. And the more and more, I became a coach at that time. And the more and more I was holding space for people who were different than me, and the more I built relationships with people who thought different, I just couldn't see them as different. I felt like they were still having the same experiences of God. They were still having the same experiences of what I called Holy Spirit. They were still having this guiding light and conviction, and they were still so good. And I didn't see any more freedom within the church than I saw without it. And so essentially that led me to hiring my first coach, honestly, just because I needed a space where no one cared what I believed, but they just wanted, I could just process. I was like, because I knew a lot of people who left the church and they were really angry and they kind of wanted me to leave. And then I had a lot of Christian friends who would just like, I'm praying for you. I'm praying for you. I'm praying for you, but they were afraid of me and they were afraid of the questions I was asking. And so hiring my own coach allowed me just to process what I was feeling in a space that I could be honest. And what I realized is if I'm in spaces that say that like I can have a relationship with God, but I can't be honest, then that doesn't really make sense. That doesn't seem like an honest relationship. And my relationship with God had always been one where I wanted to be myself and that I believed that God loved my actual self. So that was those were like the nudges that led me away. And the coming back has been interesting because I spent a long time, I didn't actually get angry about anything until I left and I saw what was going on. A lot of people thought that, what I'll say, sinful flesh led me away from the church. And it was because I was angry, but I wasn't angry until I left and saw the injustice and I saw the systematic abuse and I saw that people weren't allowed to be honest. And that's actually when a lot of people, would take me out to coffee and tell me I was a evil sinner and try to, it was just, there was no context for right relationship, no ability to have conversations. And so I spent about a year and a half, probably just like, I don't believe in any of this. I don't believe in any higher power. If it's not rooted in fact, I don't believe it. And it's been a couple years again since then. And I'll say now that I feel like I live such a rich, spirited life that I don't subscribe to the Bible being inherently the word of God. I don't need the Jesus story to be true in order to live a story of grace and resurrection. I actually think that people who have allowed their entire identity and belief system and world to crumble and lose everything and start fresh, I think they have I'm actually just going to say it. I think they have a deeper understanding of Christ and grace. The people who haven't been willing to question and let it go. And so I would say I feel like I live a very Christ-centered life. My candle actually is a Jesus candle sitting here on my desk with me. I feel deeply connected to the Christ story, but I'm not attached to it being the only way. And I know a lot of people are upset about that, or might be upset about that. But I've experienced what they call freedom. And I've experienced my own personal freedom, and it includes sovereignty. And that to me is what real liberation is. So that's a long-winded answer. I hope I answered that.
Great. Yes, I love it. I love it. Love it. Love it. It's so good. And I feel like it's interesting because I'm far earlier on in my journey than where you're at. But I feel like even just as I have unraveled a lot of my faith stories and just like belief systems that I, previously was really attached to, it has been really interesting because I feel like the inner voices that I felt as a kid, where I would be in nature and I would like feel these different voices inside me, like those feel so much more real to me now than when I was like in the systems. And that's what I think is like the coolest part is it's like, oh, like that was actually stifling some of what I actually felt inside. And now it's so much clearer and it just keeps getting clearer, which is amazing.
Yeah, I so agree. I chose that because I felt the divine as a child and as a young person. It wasn't strictly, rules and doctrine. Like that was a very real relationship and it felt like a death for it to go away. And, everyone kept saying, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. But I think we have to honor our own processes and it's going to look different for everyone. Like some people might never, throw out the Christ story as they deconstruct or as they find something more true. And that's also cool. Like, I don't want anyone to think their story has to look like mine to be right. I think it's just about evaluating what true liberation, relationship, and freedom actually are.
Yeah. I know like just recently it's been interesting because my husband and I have been reading through Mary Magdalene Revealed. We both finished it now. But it was funny because before we read it, I feel like, I don't know, I'm pretty like comfortable being in the middle of things just because I grew up in like kind of a traumatic environment and kind of just learned to live with feeling in the middle all the time.
Uh-huh.
But it was really interesting, and this isn't like my story to tell, but it has been cool to kind of see his journey as he's been unraveling some of these pieces. And it felt almost like for a little while there was this, wait, if this isn't true, then that means like God isn't true, but that doesn't make sense. But then reading Mary Magdalene Revealed, it was almost like this other part of the journey of like putting the pieces back together. So it was like throwing everything out and then being like, oh wait, there's some different pieces to this, so I can fit in a different picture that feels more aligned for me. And I think that that's where everybody's journey is different, because we all process these things differently. But leaning into it and kind of like trusting what you're feeling inside is kind of part of it.
Yeah. I mean, and the idea that like it all is supposed to look the same is the programming anyway. Like that is the programming that we're undoing, is that like anyone's relationship with spirit, God, source, whatever you prefer to say, is going to look different. And I have some friends who are like really big into like channeling and like interpreting every little thing as like a sign. And, you know, that really, like, I think that's beautiful. But my relationship with spirit has just been so practical and so that life is inherently spiritual, that like a lot of that just hasn't even seemed necessary for me to feel like I'm living a spirited or aligned life. And so it's really fun to see how different people hear and just to trust that people have their own relationship, that it doesn't have to look like mine. It's really important.
Yeah. And I love that. I feel like we're kind of transitioning very nicely here, where that's essentially sovereignty, which is a huge piece of your messaging, is sovereign leadership. And really that's rooted in worthiness. And I feel like with our conversation, it's really cool to kind of bring it back down to that of like, you are worthy of all good things. And it's this message that you speak, like, I am my own responsibility. So with that, I'd love for you to just kind of share a little bit about sovereign leadership and what that means to you, and kind of what led you to have worthiness really be a core piece of your message.
Yeah. You know, I think if we are to peel back, and if I had like a whiteboard here with you and it could draw this out, if you can just imagine 3 circles, kind of like a target, and the outer circle being, you know, the person we think we have to be, the masks we wear, the personas, the rules we follow, the different relationships that we kind of play and go in and out of. It's informed by our trauma stories. It's informed by all of the different experiences we have in culture that tell us who we're supposed to be in order to be worthy. So it's this looking outside of ourselves for validation and to tell us who to be. And as we start to do healing work, or, you know, people say inner work, you can call it whatever you want, as you start to come home to yourself. And you could even say, as you start to connect with God or spirit, there's a journey inward and into the circle. So some people in some religions believe that God is outside of you. And so it's actually more external. So you go on that outer ring, and all of a sudden you're starting to adhere to these external validation signs that you're connected to God, and God is outside of you, and God is in the sky, and God is a man, and in all of these external, you know, portals, if you will, to connecting with something. But what I have only ever seen to actually be true is the journey inward. And that journey actually means peeling back this sourcing outside of ourselves for validation, and the sourcing outside of ourselves for, am I worthy? Am I enough? Do I belong? Am I whole? You know, who has the power here? And so the journey inward, if we had like a second ring, I believe that second ring to be our true essence. And so that essence is who you came here to be. And I think that every person is inherently worthy. Every person is inherently whole. Every person has power, but it's the forgetting of that through the external sourcing of it, through being told that a good girl does this. And it happens so subtly, right? Like, that, what is that? Girls are sugar and spice and everything nice.
Yeah.
And if you just write, if you're listening to this and just write down a list of things that you intuited or heard or were told that you had to be in order to get love from your parents, your teachers, and culture, you're probably going to write down a list that says, I need to have money. I need to be small. I need to be beautiful. I need to be kind and nice and sweet. I need to make sure no one's upset with me. I probably shouldn't have boundaries. I should follow the rules. I should probably follow the rules, especially if they're written by a man. And so, again, sourcing outside of ourselves for a sense of worth. And a lot of women, and those who are socialized as women, as young girls, are told that their value and their worth only comes from a relationship with a man, if that man is their father, if that man is Father God, or if that man is their husband. And so all of a sudden we have all of these external, and that means, of course, what kind of body do you need to have to get validation from a man? What kind of, you need to be pure for your father, but like a freak in the bed for your husband, or whatever, whatever the narrative is. The undoing of all of that is really upsetting and really hard. Because where it is kind of like waking up to being like, well, who am I if I'm not all of those things? And that's whenever we go down to that true essence, is like, who are you here to be as you, for you? And even this idea that you are here for yourself, to be yourself fully expressed, is actually deeply confrontational to a lot of people with this programming, because we're taught that our pleasure is wrong, that we're broken, that we need to work for worthiness, we need to work for wholeness, and that we're powerless. And so that's why this piece of self-responsibility is so important, because it's kind of this inner bolstering of, wow, I actually don't have to feel bad if someone's upset with me. That feeling belongs to them. And it's this unhooking from cultural codependence that women are taught, that if anything outside of them is not right with them, that it's their fault, and which is shame. And like, we're literally steeped in this culture of shame and unworthiness. And as one of my teachers, James Olivia Chu Hillman, has mentioned to me, they talk about how these dynamics, you're either worthy or completely unworthy. You're either grandiose or you're completely in shame. And these dichotomies that are so polar opposite, and they're always based on our relationship to power. And that's why our relationship to men and our relationship to, God as the most powerful, you'll see women betraying their authentic selves in order to, instead of going from unworthiness to, if I look better, if I dye my hair a certain way, if I have these certain relationships and buddy up to power or perceived power, external power, then I'll be worthy. And so it takes all of that programming, which is what some people call, patriarchy. It takes all of that programming, and it says, what if you are inherently worthy? What if you were inherently whole? What if you inherently had power? And what if you belonged to yourself, and that sovereignty, that you actually have all of that within you, that you have everything you need inside of you, but it's distorted. And so that the third, the core of that little diagram that I was drawing in my mind's eye is like the God at the very core of who we are, at the very center of who we are. And I really believe that everyone has that divine nature inside of them. And that's why we know that we're inherently worthy, because even if you want to look at scripture, it's like, we're created in God's image. And I think it's Richard Rohr who says everyone needs a God who looks like them. Everyone needs a mirror of their own goodness in that way. And so the sovereignty piece and the self-responsibility piece gets us back to this idea that actually our worth and our wholeness and our power isn't something we can actually source from an external source, because that all of that would be false. It actually says nothing about who we really are. We have to go inward to find that. And that's a hell of a journey. So I know that it's like, if anyone's hearing this maybe for the first time, it's like, oh God, that's a lot. But when you realize that you can actually trust yourself, that you actually have probably known all along who you really are, it feels so liberating once you get past the whole, oh my God, this is overwhelming part.
Yeah. Wow, there was so much. I love it.
I'm like, okay, I was a little long-winded, but I think
that was That's so good. And I even just love that last piece, because a lot of my clients that I've been working with, it's this self-trust piece. And I feel like that worthiness, that's the foundation piece to developing self-trust, which is confidence. And
Yeah.
for so many of us, we want to show up in running our businesses or starting a business or, pursuing a career that we do love, or being a mother, or, whatever it might be. We want to show up really in our authentic self, in a vibrant being that we can feel it somewhere deep inside. And that journey that you just described is the work. And
Yeah.
as we go through that, even though it can be really difficult, it results in this like coming home to self, where you can just live fully in like one experience with your inner voice. Like that right now, what might feel separated, that can actually be integrated so that you can feel like a whole person again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
And it actually, I just found out about parts theory and the internal family systems theory. And if anyone wants to learn more about this from a psychological standpoint, because we talk about, reparenting and going inward and reclaiming.
Yeah.
And there are whole psychological theories based on this. So internal family systems theory, for anyone who wants to be like, what is the psychological proof of this or whatever, is all parts of you actually, in order to be a full, coherent, integrated person, we have to acknowledge that all parts of ourselves are welcome, and just things wanting to
Mm-hmm.
be acknowledged and made whole. I'll share a really quick story, because I'm in the midst of, grief. My puppy died very
Mm.
tragically last week. And part of my grief was, I went into, it was a traumatic experience. And so I went into pragmatism and getting things done, to take us to the vet hospital and to
Mm-hmm.
walk, that was my automatic response, was being a go get it done person, which is my response to trauma often, to, get it all done and do it all right. And
Mm-hmm.
it took me a while to come down from that. My body was very hyper aroused and very activated. And in the coming down from that, in the re-regulating after that traumatic experience, I was being quite short and mean. I was noticing myself be
Mm.
angry. And my tendency from my programming is, what's wrong with you? Why are you being so mean? You're a bitch. And so the programming shamed me. Like my
Mm.
own programming was like, you're not being kind, you're not being nice, you're bad,
Mm.
you're being bad, and like literally, like, go to your room until you're nice, is like the programming that I heard. And
Yeah.
I realized that voice, that anger, say I was being short and angry, which I was, and I brought that part of me to have a conversation with my higher self, with my like true self. And
Mm-hmm.
was to say, hey, Madison, what are you trying to say with all of this anger? I started to say out loud, oh my God, my grief is valid too. I have big emotions too. Like, my girlfriend, it responded totally different with a lot more emotion than me, that activated a part of me that just wanted to be like, I matter too. My emotions are big too. And whenever I realized that part of me was no longer a part that I was saying was sinful or shameful or bad, but was a part of me that needed to be acknowledged.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
I think that when we come from this programming of like punishment programming or hell
Mm-hmm.
programming or sin programming, we develop a really critical voice to parts of us that are asking for our loving attention.
Mm-hmm.
And when we can learn to relate to those areas in kindness, we actually reintegrate them and develop a relationship with ourselves and others. And that's the biggest thing. We develop a relationship with ourselves and others that is inherently kind and understanding and doesn't shame, because
Mm.
we understand where all of these parts of us are just parts that are wanting to belong back to ourselves.
Yeah.
All of this has helped me be not only compassionate towards myself, but I'm so much kinder and less judgmental to other people than I ever was before.
Mm. Yeah. And I feel like that's just like the whole, like what we were talking about, is it's, the work is hard. And then you like brought that kind of full circle where the work is hard, but then you get to show up exactly how you desire to, constantly
Mm-hmm.
working through things. And like you said, we're always still reclaiming things, but it's from a place of sovereignty. It's from a place of much more kindness and understanding.
Yeah. And that my experience is valid and your experience is valid. And I think those of us who grew up in an abusive environment or an environment where we thought we couldn't trust ourselves, our experience stopped mattering to us because it didn't matter to those that we were around. And I don't think anyone intends for that. Like, I'm not saying that this is the intention, but it's the message that's received. Obviously, I don't think any of our parents want us to grow up and be like, I wasn't loved, but we get that messaging. And so it's not about blaming the church or blaming our parents, but acknowledging that, you know, the tools weren't there. And so it's our job to do that. And you mentioned something, and I think I got us off track, but I want to circle back because I think talking about this in the context of business and leadership is really important. And I was wondering if you were like trying to go there and I hijacked us somewhere else.
Oh, like I am so go with the flow with this. I love everything we've been talking about. So, I mean, if you want to speak to that, we can. I did just want to highlight what you just said. So you mentioned like our parents, a lot of times they don't actually mean to have that happen. And it's because they're operating out of their programming. And I think that echoes back to the very beginning of the podcast, where it's just the systems that have been passed down and passed down and passed down. And it's this trickle effect. And so every time we stand in our power and go through this process, we're actually part of breaking down those systems as a whole. Like we're one piece of this puzzle that we can start kind of shifting the narrative towards a healthier and more whole perspective and just collective healing. And I think that that's a really beautiful piece of that. But if you want to take this towards work and business and whatever you were just thinking, that's okay too.
Well, I think even the idea of power, if we could even just riff on what power is, because sovereignty is that we are inherently powerful beings, that we have power, and actually no one can take our power away. It's not something that we have to reclaim from someone else. It's something we have to reclaim from our unconscious, because in our shadow material, because we have been told that we don't have it, or we perceive that we don't have it. And so I actually see a lot of people come into boundaries work or self-trust or discernment, and it's all about keeping the manipulators and the bad people away. And I understand that, because I mean, when I say I grew up in an abusive environment, narcissistic abuse was a big part of my history. And I repeated that pattern with bosses, with church leaders, and co-created it. I was a part of like repeating the cycle until I could heal it and spot it. And it makes you feel absolutely powerless, like you cannot trust yourself. Gaslit.
That's why I first started working with you, is for that exact reason.
And you're so not alone. A lot of us don't even know that that's what has happened to us. And it's this really confusing thing where we're like, but I feel like my power was taken away. I feel, and that's what abuse does. It convinces us of our powerlessness, but we're actually not powerless. As children, especially if this happened to us as children, that programming is so powerful, because you aren't powerless, but your life is very much dictated by people who are bigger than you and who are supposed to protect you. And so in those situations, we might have had our power taken away. It doesn't mean that like we're not powerful beings. We are, but when someone infringes a hierarchy of power, which isn't true power, but in our culture, we have this idea that there's the person at the top who has the most power, and typically they're white, a man, and with the most money. So that's interesting to pay attention to. But if we look at true power and what power is, it's a life-generating force. And also, who creates beings on the planet? Women. They in their womb, they are a life-giving being. And so when we can start to understand like power, if we look at the sun, if we look at energy, and we start to see that like, whoa, power is this life-giving force. All of us have this. We actually can learn to act in ways that are in alignment with our power, and to reclaim the parts of us that have forgotten our discernment and how to see. And I want to acknowledge that comes from usually traumatic things in childhood, but no one can actually take away your power, and that you can develop a new relationship with yourself, to have boundaries and to have self-trust and to have discernment, so that we're not repeating cycles of the past. but we're living in new ways, which is the self-responsibility piece. Is at the end of the day, no one can make sure I'm not manipulated or gaslit or in an unhealthy situation with a friend or a boss or even a client. Only I can be sovereign over my experience. And that comes with reconnecting to self-trust and reconnecting to myself and honoring my boundaries. Because I actually think most people aren't narcissists. Most people aren't sociopaths. Most people aren't trying to hurt us and trying to push up against our boundaries. They've been taught that probably through that same cycle. And so we actually unhook from it by taking back our self-responsibility and saying, actually, I'm responsible for my boundaries. I'm responsible for no longer engaging in this. And by deep self-honoring, which, to speak on the business piece, has been so important in business, because all of those cycles that I had in the church and, you know, deferring my power to someone else and deferring my intuition to someone else and not having boundaries in the church or in my relationships with my family, all of that codependence that was within me and bred into me was transferred into my business and into hiring business coaches and like thinking that someone else knew what was best for my vision than me. And that's not to say that I actually just hired a new person to help me clarify some strategies. So it's not to say having support isn't really valuable, because it certainly has been in my journey. But I think the biggest thing I just want to say on this is it coming from a place of, I can't trust myself, I don't know myself, they know better than me and they're on a pedestal? Or is it coming from, this person has a skill that I need to help me see myself clearly and help me map out what I want to do clearly? I think there's a really big difference, and we can't rely on someone else to make sure that we're not doing the handing over of our power business.
Yeah. I think that that's a really good clarification. And it's also really supportive for anyone who's considering hiring a coach, whether it's a life coach or a business coach or anything. I know for me, I've really had to notice who I'm looking at in regards to a coach as well, because it can be really easy to hire someone who maybe falls into some of those old patterns and I don't see it right away. So then it's also noticing, like, is this person going to empower me, or are they going to try and dictate to me what I need to do? And I think it's just kind of like tapping back into that inner voice and listening in and noticing all of the things that coach might be saying or communicating within their, you know, social media and stuff, because it is like a constant responsibility of just being present to what you're feeling and seeing.
I think even like you were saying, and I think this is what you were saying, so you can correct me if I'm not hearing you right, but that at the end of the day, it's about that coaches and therapists and healers and people who are here to support you, to help your vision come to life, whether it's your vision for a more authentic life and relationship with yourself and your partner, your friends and family, or if it's your relationship with your business and your vision and your creative projects. That's your vision. It's your life. And ideally, hiring someone should come from a place of them wanting you to become more you. For you to be in your power and for you to be shining in your magic. And that's really what coaching and healing is actually about. But because we grew up in these dynamics, we accidentally recreate the dynamics in our work. And I just want to admit that I've been guilty of this in my own business, of really wanting, especially in the early days, like I've unhooked from a lot of this and done a lot of work around it, but wanting my clients to see me as this perfect person. This idea of if I don't show up perfectly, if I'm human, if I don't confess all of my brokenness online, which is totally the Christian programming, then no one's going to like me. I have to present perfectly. It has to all be like this perfectionism idea that if they knew how human I was, that they wouldn't trust me. And that is just such bullshit, because my job is to help people see themselves, not to help them see me.
Yeah. Ooh, that's good. That's a good nugget.
So I'm writing a blog post about this now, which I'm sure will be posted by the time that you share this, just about how to remember that self-trust as we hire, especially during this really sensitive time with COVID-19 and so much uncertainty, that during times of uncertainty, this is the time to be rooting in to what you're reclaiming in yourself and to be rooting into your authentic self. And just be paying attention to the messaging. If we're moving from, oh, this person tells me I'm broken and I need what they sell, or this person is helping me find myself.
Yeah. I'm excited for that blog post. It'll be good. I'm sure.
Me too. It's a really, really, really rough draft right now. So I'm excited to polish it up.
That's awesome. So we've like chatted through so many different things. I'd love to like bring us back a little bit here. And if you had 3 kind of empowering tips, because we've talked about this massive journey that people have the opportunity to step into or perhaps are already on, but what are 3 empowering tips that you would like to leave people with so that they can start kind of implementing and heading on this journey today?
Yeah. So I think these are probably going to be pretty obvious from all the things we've talked about.
Yeah,
today.
we've definitely we've hit on them, I think.
Yeah. So I think honesty with yourself about what you need, desire, and feel. And basically it's taking responsibility for what's up with you. It's, like no one can meet my needs unless I know what those even are. I can't live a fulfilled life unless I even know what I want. And I can't express myself fully unless I know what I'm feeling and am in relationship with that part of myself. And so I think the 2 best, most obvious ways to do that are meditation and journaling. I do have a free meditation and journal guide that asks questions to prompt that on my website. It's free. You can just download it. It's a 10-minute worthiness meditation, and it asks, what do you need? What do you desire? What do you want? And along with a number of questions, but those are also things that you can just do on your own. You don't have to use mine. It's just there if you want that kind of scaffolding, because getting into a habit can be hard sometimes. So that would be the first one. Just get into an honest relationship with what's up with you. The second one would be to start practicing boundaries with others, which is a natural overflow of knowing what you need and desire and feel. And so when you start to notice, oh, I feel anxious every time this person texts me, or I feel resentful at this friend or my partner. Maybe there needs to be a boundary that you didn't know before, and now you know. And so also I have a free boundaries training on my website. If anyone wants to kind of explore what boundaries even means, you can check that out. And the last one is to follow through in one self-honoring act a day, which is just boundaries with yourself. A lot of people think that boundaries are just with others, but boundaries are actually just about honoring you and honoring what feels good for you. And so I'm sure everyone here follows holistic psychologist, Dr. Nicole LaPera, but something that I love that they talk about in the self-healing journey is to honor yourself and to reparent is what they use, that word that they use, to reparent yourself. Parents offer consistency for children. And that inner consistency is an act of boundaries, an act of self-honoring. And so to have just one thing you do every day and commit to yourself to do and follow through on proves to yourself that you are worthy of your own trust. And so whether that is every morning while I brush my teeth, I put on this song that helps me remember who I am. And it can be that simple, or it can be, every day I journal my needs. Great. It doesn't have to be elaborate, but just follow through with one self-honoring act every single day.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that. And I always deeply respect your free tools. So, and everyone, I recommend them. They're amazing. That's how I started, is with free tools. And so that's beautiful. So then kind of moving into some wrap-up questions, unless there's anything else you want to throw out there. Is there anything you are feeling before I move into the wrap-up questions?
I also just want to say, I know we've had a really juicy, deep conversation, but I'm all about keeping it light, because if it's too heavy, we get overwhelmed and we don't want to do any of this work. We're like, oh my God, I'm stressed. This is overwhelming. Everything in my life is wrong. And so if you go on my About page on my website, I have a dance playlist. And it's not even something you have to subscribe to. It's literally on Spotify, and just dance. Or if you have access to dancing, or put it on and move your body, or make something creative. This journey is just about self-expression. And so moving your body, you can do your own research on how good moving emotions through moving your body is. But just dance, like it doesn't have to be so serious either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then what is one way? So I know dancing is your fun thing. You have all the amazing dance videos on Instagram.
Yeah.
So then what is one way that you slow down amidst our busy world?
Yeah. Well, especially during the quarantine situation, lots of walks. I already love going on walks. It's been a little hard without my dog recently. And so it's been something I'm really committed to now that she's gone, with my partner, just to get out and stop working, because I love what I do and I can get lost in it. And so unhooking from all of that and just going into nature and noticing what's around me, it's really simple. Just really, really simple.
Yeah, definitely. I resonate with that because my husband and I both work from home. And so we sometimes could get so caught up in our work, and it's so important to just stop and to get out and do something different and kind of switch gears and to make it be intentional about it.
Yeah. And whenever we're not in social distancing, whenever I can be around my friends, I'm really adamant about a girls' night or hanging out and having a picnic. And just, I have some really creative friends who like to make things so beautiful, and we love to go to concerts and just fun things often. Because life can get serious, and just going to a concert, going to the park on a picnic, it's just so novel, and it seems so luxurious to be oh, we made a cheese board for our picnic, so things like that feel luxurious but are so simple, so simple.
Oh, that's great. I love that. And then who are a couple of your current role models or kind of mindset expanders?
Yes, I was actually I was so surprised thinking about this when you told me you were going to ask me this question, because it's so shifted from a year ago. I was just so surprised, which is probably indicative of my own journey shifting. But Toko Turner's book, Belonging, has deeply impacted me. And if you go to her Instagram, you'll see why. Everything is so rich. So definitely Toko from a mystical and deeply human way of living, just kind of reawakening the feminine and getting back in touch with nature and what community looks like. I'm really thinking about that right now as our world is changing. And as I'm understanding what belonging to myself means, is oh darn, I have to have a lot of relationships, not a lot, but I have to be in relationship. It's not just by myself. So that's been a big piece for me to uncover. Also, Hiro Boga. Hiro is a sovereignty teacher, and I have just devoured everything I can by Hiro, her books, her blog posts, any podcast she's been on. The way in which she leads and lives is so rooted, but so spiritual. And I appreciate that. I love Layla Delia. I think that's how you say her last name. I've not heard it said out loud.
I was curious because I saw it on your list, and I was oh, I actually get to hear how you say her name. Yeah. That's so funny.
I'm sure I've heard it on a podcast with her being interviewed, but I was Layla Delia. I think that's correct. Okay. I appreciate the artistry in which she's made from her work, and that her work is spiritual but deeply impactful. I had some limiting beliefs that if I was honest about the way in which I feel like a mystic and more spiritual and artistic about self-healing, that people wouldn't like it, because everyone's just consuming so much information right now. It's very information heavy, and 5 steps to do this and how to reparent. And I so get down on that information, but that's not as authentic to my soul. And so seeing Layla live in a way where she's expressing, but it's not these 5 steps, has really inspired me. Peta Kelly is another person. I've followed Peta for a long time, since they were doing more MLM type work and then very self-help. And I just appreciate her owning of the transitions, because I'm someone who's transitioned a lot and has these death and rebirth processes of my work. And so seeing someone fully own that in themselves is really powerful. Desiree Adaway is another person. Desiree Adaway teaches a liberatory framework. She is a woman who talks about capitalism and white supremacy and patriarchy in a very intelligent way that I find approachable no matter what your background is, but is honest and really, I believe, forward moving. Like I feel like I can take what she says and contemplate on it and process it and then apply it to the way I live and the way I work. Because if I say I'm for liberation and I'm not actually for liberation for all people, I'm just for liberation for white women, that's problematic. So I'm really learning a lot from her. And then as far as role models in relationships, James Olivia Chu Hillman is someone that teaches on right relationship, and they have, they're a friend. They don't have, the million followers, but has taught me so much about what right relationship looks like through living it out. And so everyone else on that list, I don't have a personal relationship with, but James Olivia is someone that I learned from as a teacher, as a friend, and their work on right relationship has deeply impacted my life. And then I've mentioned Dr. Nicole LePera already, but Dr. Nicole LePera, I think what she has done, I mean, one, she's a queer woman. I'm someone who is newly in a queer relationship, and seeing how she doesn't let that in any way hinder her has been really cool. Watching her show up and just own what she does and just be like, this is what I do. I'm here to serve. I'm here for the new way to live has been so deeply inspiring to me. And so I know that's a long list. I'm inspired by a lot of people. I could go on, but that's it.
No, yeah. I love it. I love hearing the different people that the people that I'm talking with are inspired by and such, because it also gives me a beautiful list to dive into. And I'm sure it'll be supportive for everyone listening as well, just to dive in deeper. It's great. I love it.
Thank you. Yeah. So many good people in the world.
Yes, yes, yes. And then how can we find and support you online?
Yeah. So MadisonMorrigan.com is my website. Madison Morrigan is my name on Instagram. I recently changed my name from my married name. And so on Facebook, it's still my maiden name until Facebook decides to give me permission to change that. So that's coming. But if you go to my website, MadisonMorrigan.com, you can find all of the ways to access me. It'll give you the link. So I have an email list where I send 2 emails a month. I post on Instagram. I have a blog. So I would say go to my website and then find the ways that you would like to interact with my work and follow along in that way. Instagram's definitely short tidbits. My website, I have my most potent blog posts, but the most current and like what's on my heart is always shared through my email list. So whatever you prefer to follow along and how you prefer to get your information.
I love it. And your new website is fantastic. So for anybody listening, like, her website is one that you could get lost in for hours. So,
thank you.
It's gorgeous. And the content is so beautiful. I love it. It's great.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That means so much. We really wanted it to have a feeling of home and like expansion. And so that means a lot to hear you say.
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely resonates that so much. So I love it. Well, thank you so much for being here with me today. It has been amazing. And there's so much, I feel like, again, I'm going to be re-listening to this multiple times. I'm sure it will be one that people come back to. You always have such a beautiful way of sharing about your work and the work that you just help to kind of put out into the world for people to journey as they're ready. And I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate you so much. So thank you so much.
Oh, I love you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the Reclamation Podcast. I hope it served you on your own reclamation journey, and know that I'm rooting for you all the way. If you want to learn more about the show guests, head to the website, thereclamationpodcast.com. And if you found value in the show, 5 stars is always appreciated. Good things are coming for you. Bye for now.